$3. That's all I have for my birthday cake." The young woman's whisper barely reached the bakery clerk, who looked down at the crumpled bills with genuine sorrow. Outside, snow fell on the quiet street, while inside, Emma sat frozen in her wheelchair, staring at the smallest cake in the display. $4, her 22nd birthday, and she couldn't even afford a single celebration. Then the door burst open, bringing winter air and laughter as a man and his daughter entered, changing everything in ways none of them could imagine. Emma had once been a promising music student at the conservatory, her professors predicting a brilliant future as a concert pianist. Her fingers possessed a rare gift, translating emotion into melody with authenticity that made audiences weep. She practiced 8 hours daily, lived and breathed music, built her entire identity around the piano bench where she felt most alive. Then came the night that shattered everything. A drunk driver, a red light, the sound of crushing metal that still haunted her dreams. When she woke 3 weeks later in the hospital, the doctors delivered their verdict with clinical detachment: complete paralysis below the waist. She would never walk again. Her parents had died when she was 12, victims of another car accident that seemed to mock her current situation with cruel irony. Her grandmother had raised her after that, a woman whose strength came from surviving the depression and who taught Emma that dignity mattered more than money. "Hold your head high," she would say, brushing Emma's hair before school. "Rich or poor, you're still my granddaughter." And that means something. But cancer had taken her grandmother just months after Emma's accident, as if the universe had decided to strip away every support, every comfort, every reason to keep fighting. Now Emma existed, rather than lived in a studio apartment where mice scratched in the walls and the radiator clanged like a ghost in chains. The building housed society's forgotten ones: elderly people on fixed incomes, disabled veterans, single mothers working 3 jobs. Emma fit right in with her disability checks that barely covered rent and her online piano students, who often canceled last minute. She taught them through a laptop screen, her fingers demonstrating on a cheap keyboard bought from a pawn shop. The real piano, her grandmother's beautiful upright, had been sold to pay medical bills. Friends had evaporated like morning mist after her accident. College classmates had tried initially, visiting with forced cheer and bundles of flowers that died within days. But young people didn't know how to handle tragedy that couldn't be fixed with a party or motivational quote. They wanted to discuss internships and dating apps, not wheelchair accessibility and chronic pain. Emma understood at 22. She wouldn't have known how to be friends with herself either. The loneliness had become a constant companion, more reliable than any human had ever been. Her birthday had always been special when her grandmother was alive. Nothing elaborate, just homemade cake and off-key singing, maybe a small gift wrapped in reused paper, but it had been acknowledgement that she mattered, that her existence was worth celebrating. This year, she had decided to create her own celebration. For weeks, she had saved coins and crumpled bills, skipping meals, turning down the heat despite winter's bite. $3 accumulated slowly, hidden in an envelope marked with a drawn heart. She had seen the cake yesterday through the bakery window, the smallest one on display, perfect in its simplicity. $4. She had counted her money 7 times, as if desperation might somehow multiply it. Mathematics remained unmoved by human need. Daniel Thompson stood at 6 feet tall, his brown hair slightly disheveled from the wind outside. Despite being worth several $1 million from his tech company that specialized in cybersecurity, he dressed like any other suburban father: jeans, flannel shirt, comfortable boots. He had learned long ago that money couldn't buy the things that mattered. It couldn't bring back his wife Sarah, who had died 4 years ago from a brain aneurysm when Sophie was only 2. It couldn't erase the image of the hospital room where he had said goodbye, holding their daughter while his world collapsed. Sophie was his universe now, a bright, chattering 6-year-old with her mother's green eyes and infectious smile. She had her mother's compassion too, always noticing when someone was sad, always trying to help. Today, he had brought her to the bakery because she had been selected as Student of the Week in kindergarten, and he had promised her any treat she wanted. The media called him the city's most eligible bachelor CEO, but he avoided their attention, focusing instead on board meetings and bedtime stories, on quarterly reports and Sophie's artwork that covered his office walls. He lived for small moments of joy that made the aching loneliness of single parenthood bearable. Sophie bounded toward the display case, her winter coat unzipped, despite Daniel's earlier protests about catching cold. "Daddy, look at all the cakes. Can we get 2? One for now and one for later." She pressed her nose against the glass, leaving small fog circles. Her kindergarten teacher had named her Student of the Week for helping a classmate who spoke no English, and Daniel had promised any treat she wanted. He watched her deliberate with the seriousness of a judge, weighing chocolate against vanilla, sprinkles against frosting roses. That one. Sophie pointed decisively at a chocolate cake with rainbow decorations, with star candles, the sparkly ones. As the clerk began boxing their selection, Sophie's attention shifted to the young woman maneuvering her wheelchair toward the door. The girl's face caught Sophie's interest, not the wheelchair, which her friend Marcus also used, but the sadness that seemed to radiate from her, like cold from ice. "Wait," Daniel said softly, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed, but gentle enough not to startle. Emma paused, her hand on the wheel, unsure if he was addressing her. Their eyes met across the small space. And in that moment, something shifted in the air between them. Invisible, but undeniable. The bakery felt warmer suddenly. Or perhaps that was just Emma's embarrassment, heating her cheeks as the handsome stranger approached her wheelchair. She wanted to flee to avoid whatever pity was about to be offered. But the snow outside had intensified, and she had nowhere else to go anyway. Her apartment would be cold and empty, the birthday cake just another dream deferred. "I couldn't help but overhear," Daniel said, crouching down to her eye level, a gesture that surprised her with its thoughtfulness. Most people stood above her, literally talking down. "Today's your birthday." His voice held no pity, just genuine curiosity, as if birthdays in bakeries during snowstorms were natural conversation starters. Emma nodded, unable to trust her voice. Sophie had abandoned the cake display and now stood beside her father, studying Emma with the uninhibited curiosity of childhood. "You're pretty," the little girl announced. "Why are you in that chair? Did you hurt your legs?" "My friend Marcus has a chair too, but his has race car stickers. Does yours have stickers underneath?" "Sophie," Daniel said gently. But Emma found herself almost smiling at the child's directness. It was refreshing after years of adults dancing around her disability with uncomfortable euphemisms. "It's okay," Emma said, her voice stronger than expected. "I was in an accident. My legs don't work anymore, but the chair helps me get around. And no stickers, though. Race cars sound pretty cool." Sophie considered this information seriously. "You should get unicorn stickers. Or stars." "Daddy, she doesn't have stickers or a birthday cake. That's 2 problems." The child's logic was irrefutable, and she looked at her father expectantly, as if waiting for him to produce his usual solution to problems. Daniel stood slowly, his mind already made up, but trying to find words that wouldn't sound condescending. "Would you let us buy your cake as a birthday gift from strangers who believe birthdays should always have cake?" Emma's pride warred with her poverty, a familiar battle that poverty usually won through sheer exhaustion. "I couldn't. You don't even know me." The words came out as whispered protest, lacking conviction because she wanted so desperately to say yes. "Then let's fix that," Daniel said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel. This is Sophie." Now we're not strangers. And Sophie's right. Birthdays without cake are against the rules, aren't they, Soph? Absolutely against the rules, Sophie confirmed solemnly. It's probably illegal. We could get arrested if we let you leave without cake. She grabbed Emma's hand with the confidence of a child who had never learned to fear rejection. What kind do you want? The chocolate one is amazing, but Daddy says, I always choose chocolate, so maybe you want something different. Emma felt tears threatening, the kindness overwhelming after so much time alone. The small vanilla one, she managed, the one with white frosting. That's the one you were looking at, the clerk said softly, having watched the entire exchange. I'll box it up special. No charge for the birthday girl. She winked at Daniel, who nodded gratefully, and discreetly slipped a 20 into the tip jar. As the clerk prepared both cakes, Sophie chatted non-stop to Emma about kindergarten, her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, the class hamster named Mr. Whiskers, and how she was learning to read chapter books all by herself. Emma found herself responding, drawn into the child's enthusiastic orbit. Daniel watched them interact, noting how naturally Emma spoke to his daughter. How Sophie had claimed the young woman's attention with the determination she had inherited from her mother. Would you like to sit with us? Daniel asked, as the clerk handed over the boxed cakes. We were going to have a cake celebration here. Sophie insists cake tastes better with more people. Another one of her rules. Emma hesitated. This felt like crossing a line from accepting necessary charity to something more personal, more dangerous. She had learned to protect herself from hope, knowing how much it hurt when it inevitably disappointed. But Sophie was already pushing a chair aside to make room for the wheelchair, chattering about which table had the best view of the snow. Just for a few minutes, Emma agreed, telling herself it was for the child's sake. Not because the man's brown eyes held a warmth she hadn't seen directed at her in 2 years. They settled at a small table by the window, the world outside turning white and soft. The clerk brought plates and forks, smiling knowingly as she sat them down. Sophie insisted they sing Happy Birthday, her voice high and sweet, while Daniel's baritone provided harmony. Other customers joined in spontaneously, creating an impromptu chorus that made Emma's carefully constructed walls begin to crack. When they finished, Sophie commanded her to make a wish. Emma closed her eyes, trying to think of something small enough to be possible. Not to walk again. That was beyond even birthday magic. Not for her parents or grandmother back. Death was permanent. Maybe just for this moment to last a little longer. For the warmth of unexpected kindness to delay the cold return to reality. She blew out the single candle the clerk had added, and Sophie cheered as if Emma had accomplished something magnificent. What did you wish for? Sophie asked, then immediately covered her mouth. Wait, you can't tell or it won't come true. That's another rule, so many rules, Emma said, surprising herself by actually smiling. How do you keep track? I have a list, Sophie said seriously. In my unicorn notebook, Daddy bought it for me, after Mommy went to heaven because he said I could write letters to her in it. The casual mention of death shifted the atmosphere. Emma looked at Daniel, seeing new shadows in his eyes, understanding suddenly that she wasn't the only one at this table carrying loss. I'm sorry, she said quietly. 4 years ago, Daniel said simply, brain aneurysm. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. He cut a piece of cake for Sophie, his movements automatic. You learn to live around the absence, not through it or over it. Around it, like water finding its way around a stone. Emma understood exactly. My grandmother died 2 years ago, right after my accident. She was all I had left. The words came easier than expected, perhaps because he had offered his own pain first, making it an exchange rather than a confession. That's why you were alone on your birthday, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Because all your people went to heaven. That's sad. But now you have us. We can be your birthday people, right, Daddy? Daniel looked at Emma, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not just a pretty woman in a wheelchair. Not just someone needing help, but a survivor of losses that mirrored his own. Sophie has decided, apparently, and she's very persistent when she makes decisions. Like her dad, Sophie added, then focused on her cake with intense concentration. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, the bakery warm and safe, while snow continued falling outside. Emma felt something she had thought dead stirring inside her chest, dangerous and fragile as spun glass. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when disappointment waited around every corner, but sitting here with these two strangers who didn't look at her with pity, who included her as naturally as breathing. She found herself wanting to believe in possibilities again. "What did you do before?" Daniel asked. "You mentioned your accident, but what was your life like?" "I was studying music," Emma said, then corrected herself. "No, that's not right. I was music piano specifically. I lived it, breathed it, built everything around it. When the accident took my legs, it somehow took that too. I still teach a little online, but it's not the same. Playing used to be like flying. Now it's just pressing keys." Daniel heard the grief in her voice, recognized it as the same tone he used when talking about Sarah. Loss changes everything, even the things it doesn't directly touch. "I used to love cooking elaborate meals for Sarah. Now I can barely make Sophie mac and cheese without remembering how Sarah would steal bites while I worked." "But mac and cheese is good," Sophie protested, "especially with extra cheese and those breadcrumb things on top." "Your sophisticated palate is noted," Daniel said dryly, but his eyes remained on Emma. "Do you still have a piano?" "A keyboard," Emma admitted. "I sold my grandmother's piano for medical bills. The keyboard island functional." Sophie perked up. "We have a piano, a big one that nobody plays. It just sits there being furniture. You could play ours." She turned to her father with excitement. "Can she, Daddy? Can Emma Kay play our piano?" Daniel saw Emma's immediate withdrawal, the way she pulled back into herself like a turtle, sensing danger. "Sophie, Emma probably has things to do." "Actually," Emma interrupted, surprising herself, "I don't. Today's my birthday, and I have absolutely nothing to do except go home to my empty apartment and eat cake alone." The honesty felt reckless, but liberating, but I couldn't impose. "You've already been too kind." "It's not imposing if we're inviting you," Daniel said, and Sophie's right. The piano hasn't been played since. Well, in years it would be nice to hear music in the house again. Emma wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt, but she had learned that wanting led to disappointment. That hope was just delayed. Heartbreak. "I don't know if I can play anymore. Not really play. My body works differently now. Everything's harder." "So try," Sophie said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "If it's hard, we'll help. That's what friends do." Friends. The word hung in the air like a question Emma didn't know how to answer. She looked at Daniel, searching his face for signs of pity or obligation, finding instead something that looked dangerously like genuine interest. "Okay," she said before fear could change her mind. "But I'll need help getting in the car. My chair doesn't fold easily." "And we have a van," Daniel said. "Already standing. Bought it last year when Sophie's soccer team needed transportation. Plenty of room for your chair." He paused, studying her face. "Unless you're having second thoughts." "No pressure, Emma. We're not the kind of people who kidnap wheelchair women with birthday cake." Emma finished and was rewarded with Daniel's surprised laugh, a sound that transformed his entire face from handsome to breathtaking. "Exactly. We have a strict no kidnapping policy. Sophie made me sign a contract." As they prepared to leave, the bakery clerk caught Daniel's arm. "That was a kind thing you did," she said quietly. Daniel glanced at Emma, who was laughing at something Sophie was saying about unicorns. I think she's the one being kind, he said. We've been alone in our grief for so long, Sophie and I. Maybe we need her more than she needs us. The drive to Daniel's house took them through neighborhoods that gradually shifted from Emma's familiar working-class streets to tree-lined avenues, where houses sat back from the road like shy giants. Emma felt increasingly out of place, her thrift store coat shabby against the van's leather seats. But Sophie kept up a steady stream of chatter from her car seat, pointing out Christmas decorations that were already appearing, despite it being early November, telling Emma about each house as if she were a tour guide. That's where Mrs. Henderson lives. She has 7 cats, but pretends she only has 2, because there's a rule about how many pets you can have. And that blue house is the Johnsons. They give out full-size candy bars on Halloween. Oh, and that's our house. Emma's breath caught. The house was beautiful, but not ostentatious. A 2-story colonial with white pillars and black shutters, the kind of home she had imagined living in back when the future had seemed full of possibility. Daniel pulled into the garage, and Emma felt panic rising. What was she doing here? These people lived in a different world, one where wheelchairs and thrift store clothes didn't belong. You okay? Daniel asked softly, correctly, reading her expression. We can take you home if you'd prefer. No, Emma said quickly, then more calmly. No, I'm fine. It's just, your house is lovely. It's too big, Daniel said, getting out to help with her chair. Sarah wanted a large family. We bought it planning for 4 kids, maybe 5. Now it's just Sophie and me rattling around in all this space. The interior was warm and lived in despite its size. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Sophie's toys were scattered across the living room floor, and photographs filled every surface, most featuring a beautiful red-haired woman who could only be Sarah. Emma expected to feel jealous, but instead felt only sadness for the love Daniel had lost. The piano sat in what must have been intended as a formal living room, but had been transformed into Sophie's art studio. Easels held paintings in various stages of completion, and the floor was protected by plastic sheets splattered with paint. The piano itself was a Steinway Grand, its black surface gleaming despite the thin layer of dust. It needs tuning, Daniel said apologetically. I've been meaning to call someone. Emma wheeled herself to the bench, her hands trembling as she lifted the fallboard. The keys were cool under her fingers. Ivory and ebony waiting patiently for someone to bring them back to life. She played a simple scale, listening to the tone. It did need tuning, but not badly. Her hands found a C major chord, then a progression. And suddenly she was playing, not performing, not practicing, just playing. A simple melody at first, something her grandmother used to hum while cooking. Then variations that grew increasingly complex as her fingers remembered their purpose. Sophie stood transfixed, her mouth open in wonder. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching Emma transform from a broken woman in a wheelchair to something luminous and whole. The music filled the house, chasing away shadows that had lived there for 4 years, bringing warmth to rooms that had been just spaces to exist. When Emma finally stopped, her face wet with tears she hadn't noticed falling, Sophie exploded into applause. That was magic. Real magic. Daddy, did you hear? It was like the house was singing. I heard, Daniel said quietly. His own eyes were suspiciously bright. That was Emma. That was extraordinary. I haven't played like that since before, Emma said, her voice wondering. I didn't think I could anymore. The music felt dead inside me. But here, in this room, with you both listening, it came back. Sophie climbed onto the piano bench beside Emma, careful not to crowd her. Will you teach me? I want to make magic, too. Emma looked at Daniel, questioning. He nodded, a smile playing at his lips. If you're willing. I've been meaning to find her a teacher, but somehow, it never felt right. Maybe because we were waiting for you." The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Emma turned back to Sophie. "I can teach you, but it takes practice every day, even when you don't feel like it." "I practice soccer every day," Sophie said seriously, "and brushing teeth and being kind, though Daddy says that one should come naturally." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the piano, Emma showing Sophie basic finger positions, while Daniel worked in the dining room, his laptop open, but his attention clearly on the two at the piano. The domestic sounds, Sophie's giggles, Emma's patient corrections, the tentative notes becoming more confident, created a tapestry of normally that made Daniel's chest ache with longing for something he hadn't dared hope for. When evening came, Daniel insisted Emma stay for dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti. "Sophie's favorite with garlic bread?" Sophie asked hopefully. "Would I dare serve spaghetti without garlic bread? There are probably rules against it." The meal was simple but perfect, the kind of easy family dinner Emma had missed for years. Sophie dominated the conversation, telling elaborate stories about school, while Daniel occasionally interjected corrections or clarifications. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn into their warm orbit. After dinner, Sophie begged to show Emma her room. It was an explosion of pink and purple unicorns covering every surface. "This is Mr. Bubbles," Sophie said, presenting a well-worn stuffed elephant. "And this is my mom." She pointed to a photo on her nightstand. Sarah laughing, holding a baby Sophie. "She was beautiful," Emma said honestly. "Daddy says I look like her." "But I think I look like me," Sophie said philosophically. As the evening wound down, Daniel drove Emma home, Sophie asleep in the back seat. "Thank you," he said, as they pulled up to her building, "for playing for us, for dinner, for making Sophie laugh, for making the house feel alive again. Thank you for the cake," Emma said, "for treating me like a person instead of a problem to be solved. You're not a problem, Emma. He paused, searching for words. "You're a gift we didn't know we needed." Inside her apartment, the silence felt heavier than usual, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel permanent. 3 days passed before Daniel called. Emma had convinced herself the afternoon had been a fluke, a moment of kindness that wouldn't be repeated, but his voice on the phone was warm and certain. "Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you. She's been practicing finger exercises on the kitchen table. I think we need to make this official. Piano lessons twice a week. I'll pay your regular rate, of course." $20 an hour, Emma said, embarrassed by how little it sounded. "That's ridiculous. Professional teachers charge at least $60. We'll do $75. "Daniel, that's too much. It's fair. Wednesday and Saturday, I can pick you up." Emma wanted to refuse to protect herself from the hope that was building despite her best efforts. But the thought of seeing them again, of playing that beautiful piano, of being part of something larger than her own survival, was too tempting. "Okay," she agreed. Wednesdays and Saturdays. The first official lesson was a revelation. Sophie was a natural student, eager and focused. With an intuitive understanding of rhythm, Emma found herself planning lessons with extra care, creating exercises that would challenge but not frustrate. Daniel worked from home that day, and the sound of him typing in the next room created a domestic backdrop that made Emma's heart ache with longing. "You're a wonderful teacher," Daniel said afterward, as Sophie ran upstairs to get something she wanted to show Emma. Patient but demanding exactly what she needs. She's easy to teach. She wants to learn. That makes all the difference. "She wants to impress you," Daniel corrected. "She's been telling everyone at school about her piano teacher who makes magic with music." Before Emma could respond, Sophie returned with a handful of drawings. "I made these for you. This one is you at the piano, and this one is all of us having cake. And this one is what I think your apartment looks like, but with unicorns." Emma studied the drawings, her throat tight with emotion. In Sophie's artistic vision, Emma wasn't in a wheelchair. She was simply part of the family tableau, no different from Daniel or Sophie herself. Weeks passed in a rhythm of lessons and lingering conversations. Daniel started joining them at the piano sometimes, his bass voice harmonizing with Sophie's soprano as Emma played. These moments felt dangerous in their perfection, like glimpses of a life that wasn't really hers. One Saturday in early December, Emma arrived to find the house being decorated for Christmas. A massive tree dominated the living room, and Sophie was vibrating with excitement. "We're decorating. You have to help. It's tradition." "I don't think your traditions include me," Emma said gently. "They do now," Sophie said firmly. "Right, Daddy?" Daniel appeared with boxes of ornaments, his smile warm. "Right. Emma's part of our traditions now." They spent the afternoon decorating, Daniel lifting Sophie to reach higher branches, while Emma sorted ornaments and told them stories about each one. When they reached a delicate glass angel, Sophie grew quiet. "This was Mommy's favorite," she said. "She always put it on top." Daniel's face tightened, but he took the angel carefully. "Would you like to do it this year, sweetheart?" Sophie shook her head. "You do it." But Emma should watch as Daniel lifted Sophie to place the angel. Emma felt the weight of being allowed into this intimate moment. She was an outsider, witnessing private grief. Yet Sophie had insisted she belong here. "Perfect," Sophie declared, then looked at Emma. "Next year, you can help place it." Next year. The assumption that Emma would still be in their lives made her chest tight with hope and fear in equal measure. That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, Daniel sat beside Emma on the piano bench. "She's attached to you," he said quietly. "I'm attached to her too," Emma admitted. "To both of you, Emma." Daniel turned to face her fully. "I need to tell you something. I looked up your blog. I read it." Emma stiffened. Her blog was where she poured out her darkest thoughts, her struggles, her pain. There was a post from 3 years ago, Daniel continued, about saving a little girl at a crosswalk. Red rain boots with ducks, curly brown hair, a unicorn backpack. Emma's breath caught as the memory surfaced. A rainy day before her accident. A child who had darted into traffic chasing a ball. Emma grabbing her just as a car sped past. "Emma, that was Sophie." The world seemed to tilt. "What?" "I was in the coffee shop across the street. I saw you save her, but you disappeared before I could thank you. I looked for you for weeks." His voice was thick with emotion. "You saved my daughter. And then years later, you came back into our lives when we needed saving again." Emma was crying now, unable to process this revelation. "It's fate," Daniel said softly. "It has to be." He leaned closer, and Emma knew he was going to kiss her. She wanted it more than she had wanted anything since the accident. But fear won. "I can't," she whispered. "Daniel, I can't be someone's project. I can't be the poor, disabled girl you save because you feel grateful." "Stop," his voice was sharp. "Is that really what you think? That this is about pity or gratitude? Isn't it, Emma? You're brilliant. You're talented. You make my daughter laugh. You've brought music back into our home. When I look at you, I don't see the wheelchair. I see a woman who survived losses that would break most people and still manages to create beauty." He paused, his voice softer. "I see someone I'm falling for despite every voice in my head telling me it's too soon, too complicated. You're falling for me completely." Emma couldn't speak, so Daniel continued. "I know it's only been 2 months. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense. But Emma, you fit into our lives like you were always meant to be there." "I'm scared," Emma whispered. I've lost everyone I've ever loved. If I let myself love you and Sophie, and then lose you, then we go slow, Daniel said. No pressure, no expectations, just see where it goes. Emma nodded, and Daniel smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead before helping her to her chair. The next week, Sophie had a meltdown when a classmate said cruel things about her not having a mother. Emma held her while she cried, understanding the pain in a way others couldn't. Do you forget your mom sometimes? Sophie asked. All the time, Emma admitted. Sometimes I still reach for my phone to call my grandmother. Does it ever stop hurting? It changes, Emma said carefully. Becomes softer, like a bruise healing. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel pulled Emma into his arms. Thank you. You knew exactly what she needed to hear. She's easy to love, Emma said simply. Yes, Daniel agreed, looking at Emma meaningfully. She Island. Their first real kiss happened 2 weeks later, after Sophie's school Christmas concert. Emma had attended sitting in her wheelchair in the accessible section, while Daniel stood nearby. Sophie had waved enthusiastically from the stage, pointing Emma out to her friends as my piano teacher. Afterward, in the parking lot with snow falling around them, Daniel had cupped Emma's face in his hands and kissed her like she was precious, like she was whole, like the wheelchair didn't exist. I love you, he said against her lips. I know it's too soon and too complicated, but Emma, I love you. I love you too, she whispered back, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. They were careful around Sophie, not wanting to confuse her. But Sophie, with a child's intuition, had already figured it out. Are you and Emma dating? She asked Daniel one morning. Would that be okay with you? Sophie considered this seriously. Will she move in with us? Not right now. We're taking things slow, but eventually. Maybe, if that's what we all want, Sophie nodded decisively. Good. I already picked out paint colors for her room. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth. Emma had practically moved in, though she kept her apartment. The blog post about finding love after loss had gone viral, bringing her offers to write a book. One April evening, Daniel was nervous during dinner. Sophie kept giggling, clearly in on something. Emma, Daniel said finally, dropping to one knee beside her wheelchair. You saved my daughter twice. Once from a car, once from grief. You brought music and light back into our lives. Would you marry me? Emma couldn't speak through her tears, so she just nodded, pulling him up for a kiss. While Sophie danced around them, they married in June in the backyard. Daniel carried Emma down the aisle while Sophie stood as maid of honor. When she dropped the ring and had to crawl under chairs to find it, everyone laughed. It was perfectly imperfect. At the reception, Daniel surprised everyone by playing a simple melody on the piano. For my wife, he said, who taught me that broken doesn't mean worthless. The bakery clerk, who had witnessed their first meeting, gave a toast. $3 for a birthday cake led to this. Never underestimate the power of kindness. They opened a piano school for disabled children called Keys to Hope. Emma wrote her book dedicating it to her grandmother, Sophie and Daniel. The signing was held at the bakery where it all began. This story started with a birthday wish. Emma told the crowd, I wished for something small, just to matter for one day. What I got was a reminder that we all matter every day to someone. Sophie, now 8, stood up in the audience. Tell them about the tradition. Emma smiled. Every year on my birthday, we go to the bakery and buy cake for someone who needs it. Last year, it was an elderly man. This year, a teenage mom. We never tell them why, just that birthdays should be celebrated. The tradition spread. The bakery started a pay it forward cake fund. Hundreds of cakes were given away each year, each one potentially changing a life. Years later, when Sophie was 16, She wrote her college essay about finding her second mother over a birthday cake. She got into every school she applied to. The night before Sophie left for college, they went to the bakery one last time as a family. "I'm scared," Sophie admitted. "Good," Emma said. "All the best adventures start with fear. Were you scared that day when Dad first talked to you?" "Terrified. I almost left, but you stayed. Your dad made me feel seen, and you grabbed my hand and decided I belonged to you." Daniel cleared his throat. Emotional. "You saved us." "We saved each other," Emma corrected. "That's what family does." The piano school grew to multiple locations. The book became a series. The blog became a foundation. But at the center was a simple truth. A woman with $3 met a single father, and together they built something beautiful from broken pieces. On Emma's 30th birthday, she sat at the piano in their home, playing while Daniel worked, and Sophie, home from college, painted. The music filled the space between them, expressing what words couldn't about loss and love, about courage and choice. Outside, snow began to fall, and Emma smiled, remembering another snowy day when $3 wasn't enough for cake, but was exactly enough for everything that mattered.